Howdy, my name is Matt Rabel. I'm here to do a demo of Spring Security. And this is in contrast to Java EE6 Security, which I showed in a previous demo. You can find that on YouTube at youtube.com/mrabel. In this demo, I'm going to show you how Spring Security works to do basic authentication as well as form-based authentication, how to talk to a file, as well as how to talk to a database. So first of all, I have this Ajax login example application. You can read more about it on my blog. If you Google for Ajax jQuery, Spring Security, Rabel, chances are you'll find it right there. So this is a pretty simple application. It has a list of users, which you can add new ones to. And there we are. New user is in there, it's sortable. So very simple, doesn't do much. What we're going to do is we're going to take this URL here, users, and we are going to secure it so it requires someone to log in. So to begin, unlike Java EE6, where you have a security constraint in your web XML, we simply have a security.xml file, and it can be named whatever you like in your class path, but I like to put it in webinf. So since we're using Maven, source main web app webinf, create a new file, call it security.xml. And it basically has a whole bunch of XML namespaces at the top, an HTTP autoconfig, which allows you to say, hey, that user's pattern, and to use basic authentication. The reason we have /app/users is because I'm using URL rewrite filter to have pretty URLs. Our authentication manager here is used to encode the passwords with SHA, as well as to define the usernames and passwords in a file. And so this is simply admin, or this is simply user, and this is admin encoded with SHA encryption. And then this user security advice is just because I'm using a backend that has some additional features in there, and I just need to override that, so it's basically empty and doesn't do any special magic. And you'll notice IntelliJ IDEA is smart enough to actually prompt me to add that security filter to my web XML. So I'll go back here, add a new filter. We define it as security filter. IntelliJ tells me I need a mapping for it. So I'll go ahead on here to filter mappings, add it right after my rewrite filter, and boom, there we are. The last thing we need to do in our web XML at least is to add a reference to that file. Now after we've done that, we should be able to stop, restart our application, and we'll be prompted to log in using basic authentication when we hit that user's URL. So refresh the page by hitting enter. One password kicks in, which is a great tool to remember your passwords. I'm not going to use it here, and I'm going to type in admin. And that allows me to log in. The reason it killed all the users and I don't see my foo bar in there anymore is I'm talking to an H2 database that gets cleared out whenever I restart the server. One of the problems with basic authentication that we saw in the last demo with Java EE6 is that you cannot log out. This logout link hits a logout controller that invalidates a session, but it still doesn't actually log the person out, because the only way to log out with basic authentication is to close the browser. One thing you might be wondering is, where did we get these Spring dependencies, Spring Security dependencies, and why is that already in the project? The reason for that is because this project inherits from AppFuse, and AppFuse already has those dependencies in there. So if I look in AppFuse Web here, it has a number of dependencies on Spring Security right here, on the tag libs, on the framework itself. And the reason there's some exclusions is because regular Spring had some conflicts. So that's @fuse 210. So the next thing I want to do is I want to demonstrate how we can easily take that URL and require HTTPS for it. This with Java EE is done with a user data constraint tag in the web XML. With Spring Security, it's as easy as saying requires channel, and then you can choose between any HTTP and HTTPS. So the nice thing about this is it allows you to actually switch between HTTP and HTTPS. With standard Java EE 6 security, it isn't that simple. So now we have HTTPS there. We'll have to go into our pom.xml and configure Jetty so it listens on an HTTPS socket. So we have the regular channel connector on 8080 and an SSL one on 8443. And then in order for it to start up correctly, you need the key tool plugin. And of course, if you're using Tomcat, you can generate the keys on the command line. If you're using Jetty standalone, you can generate the keys the same way. Now that we've done that, we can start our server up. You can see that the key store doesn't exist, creates it, and our app is started. Now if we go to Firefox and we go to localhost 8080, click on users, it will prompt us to log in. Connection is untrusted. Go ahead and accept that. Close down Firebug here, and boom, we're logged in with HTTPS. And you might remember if you saw the Java EE 6 demo, this did not work in Jetty, and so Spring Security handles that. Next thing we're going to do is change from basic authentication to form-based authentication. This is fairly simple. All we have to do is erase this HTTP basic, which we can actually leave in there, and then it'll prompt us with an HTML form. If we're using a browser that accepts HTML, if we're using like web services, it'll prompt us for basic authentication. So let's go ahead and leave that in there. This is simply how you configure form-based authentication. You give it the name of the page that you're going to log in with, the failure, and then what form to process that with. So the last time I showed you this login.jsp that has an action of JSecurityCheck, uses JUsername, JPassword, and Spring Security basically uses those same conventions by default. Actually, that's wrong. They don't use JSecurityCheck by default. It's JSpringSecurityCheck. I like to use the standard way, so I just left that in there. So now if we stop and restart, we will be using form-based authentication instead of basic authentication. While we're at it, we can also add Remember Me here. And that's as simple as configuring Remember Me right there. And this won't work with basic authentication just because basic authentication uses browser mechanisms. This right here uses a DAO that I'll show you when we get to the JDBC authentication. So we'll comment this out for now. Go to Firefox, hit that URL, and we get the form instead of basic authentication. So now we can log in with something like user. We can do whatever we like, and then if we log out, it actually works. Prompts us to log in again if we try again. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to talk to a database instead of to a file. So I'll add Remember Me back in. And on this authentication provider, simply add a reference to our user DAO. and we'll remove the user service. And that's it. The database that's populated is populated by the sample data right here. You can see we have admin CE versus in security.xml we had DO33. That's because we've used the password of admin JDBC. Just to prove that, I'll bring up Firefox, go to this service here, and show you that if I do admin JDBC CE3D is what it starts with, back in IntelliJ, sample data is CE3D. So we can use the DB unit plugin to populate our database. This is an H2 database that sits on the file system. Everything worked there. Start up our server. And now when we're prompted to log in, we can use admin and admin JDBC for the password, and we'll prove that we're talking to our database. Go back to home, understand the risks. Log in, type admin JDBC, and log in. Boom, we're talking to a database. Pretty slick, eh? Now we can log out, log back in. Works pretty nice. And we can even do remember me. If we log out, log in, and click remember me, then we can close our browser using Command Q on a Mac and reopen it and go to localhost 8080 and click users, and boom, we're logged in. Actually, this happened to me in the demo that I did at the Utah Jug, and so I'm going to keep this in there in this demo because remember me actually doesn't work in the way I've configured it. To prove that remember me normally does work, we can go to one of the AppFuse demos at demo.appfuse.org and log in with admin, check the box, and quit our browser, restart, and you can see we're logged in automatically. So that's how remember me is supposed to work. So this has been a demo of Spring Security 3, which is one of my favorite security frameworks. It solves a lot of the problems that Java EE security has with password encryption, redirecting from HTTP to HTTPS, as well as easily talk to a database that's customizable. You get to use your own DAO, your own role schema, and things of that sort. Limitations of Spring Security include your authentication mechanism is now configured in your WAR file. With that security XML file, you told it to talk to a file, or you told it to talk to a database. You might have configured it for LDAP. You can move those files and load them from outside your actual application, but by default, it's kind of in there. You can only secure methods with annotations that are loaded by Spring in the application context. And obviously my remember me example doesn't work, so that's kind of a shame, but I felt I should leave it in there to show my shame. So thanks for watching this video. Hope you have a great day.